2 million years ago, a human species walked this earth long before us. They were hunters, explorers, survivors, and for nearly 20 times longer than our species has existed, they thrived. This is the story of Homo erectus, the most successful humans in history. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten human stories, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with where you're watching from, and share this journey into our ancient past. Imagine standing on the banks of a river in Indonesia nearly 117,000 years ago. The air is heavy with damp heat, cicadas drone in the background, and a low fire flickers in the twilight. Beside that fire lies a footprint pressed into the mud. At first glance, it looks so familiar that you might mistake it for your own. But it isn't. That print belonged to Homo erectus, a human species that thrived on this planet for nearly 2 million years. 2 million. That's almost 20 times longer than our own species, Homo sapiens, has been around. If time were a book, our chapters have just begun. While there's filled volumes to grasp just how extraordinary that is, think of it this way. We modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years. And in that short span, we've gone from stone tools to digital cities, from hunting on the savannah to walking on the moon. Yet Homo erectus endured across shifting climates, dangerous predators, and massive environmental upheavals for an unimaginably longer span. In evolutionary terms, they weren't a failed draft of humanity, they were a masterpiece of survival. First appeared around 2 million years ago in Africa, during a time when landscapes were changing. Forests were thinning, grasslands stretched wider, and animals were adapting to new patterns of life. Earlier human relatives like Homo habilis still roamed those lands, but Erectus was different. They stood taller, walked with the same rhythm we do, and carried themselves with a presence that marked a turning point in the human story. From Africa, they spread outward, leaving footprints not just on one continent, but across 3 Africa, Asia, and Europe. No other human species before them had ever reached so far. What makes their journey even more haunting is how long they lasted. The last known fossils of Homo erectus were discovered on the island of Java in Indonesia. These remain skull caps, and shin bones date to about 108,000 to 117,000 years ago. That means while our own species was beginning its first cautious steps beyond Africa, groups of Erectus were still holding on in their last refuge. In a sense, they were the old guardians of the human line, watching the rise of a new kind of people who would eventually inherit the earth. And so the question arises, did our ancestors ever meet them? Could a band of Homo sapiens hunters have stumbled across a group of Erectus near a waterhole? Did eyes that looked like ours ever meet across the firelight? The fossil record offers no conclusive proof, and most evidence suggests the timelines didn't overlap in the same place. Yet tantalizing clues like the strange story of ancient head lice carrying genetic lineages older than our species itself suggest there may have been some form of contact. If true, it means our story and theirs were not just parallel, but briefly intertwined. But even without direct meetings, their presence shaped what we would become. Many scientists regard Homo erectus as the first true human species in our evolutionary journey. They weren't ape-like creatures bumbling through the forest. They were travelers, hunters, thinkers, and toolmakers. They had faces more like ours than any before them, and they walked upright with the same efficiency that allows us to cover vast distances. They weren't perfect copies of us, far from it, but they laid the foundation for everything that followed. Consider their resilience. 2 million years is not just survival, it's mastery. They lived through dramatic ice ages and long warm periods, through droughts that parched the land and floods that reshaped it. They adapted to open savanna, dense forest, coastal shores, and high plateaus. Where other species vanished in the face of change, Erectus endured. They became the blueprint for endurance, adaptability, and resourcefulness. And they weren't merely surviving. They were innovating. Archaeologists have found evidence that Homo erectus crafted stone tools far more sophisticated than their predecessors. These weren't just simple flakes knocked off a rock. Their hand axes, shaped with symmetry and purpose, show a level of planning and foresight that hints at minds capable of more than mere instinct. They also learned to harness fire, a discovery that transformed not only their knights, but the trajectory of human evolution itself. Imagine the moment when a lightning strike left behind a smoldering branch, and instead of letting it burn out, Erectus carried that ember into camp, learning to feed it, protect it, and keep it alive. Fire wasn't just warmth or light, it was a revolution. But perhaps most striking of all is how human they already seemed. Fossils show signs of care for the injured and elderly, of individuals surviving long after they had lost teeth or suffered injuries that would have made living alone impossible. That means others must have shared food, watched over them, and valued them enough to keep them alive. Compassion, something we think of as uniquely ours, may have its roots in the fires of Homo Erectus camps. Their story raises haunting questions. How did they see the world? Did they look up at the same stars with curiosity or fear? Did they tell each other stories in simple gestures and sounds? Did they feel pride after a successful hunt, or grief when one of their own died? We cannot know for sure. But in the faint traces they left behind in bones, tools, fire pits, and engravings on shells, we glimpse sparks of what we call humanity. And then, after 2 million years, they were gone. The forests of Java grew dense, the climate shifted, and the ember passed into other hands. Yet they didn't truly vanish. Their legacy is etched into us. Every time we shape a tool, share food, sit together by fire, or walk with steady rhythm, across a landscape, we echo Homo erectus. They were not a primitive prelude to humanity. They were humanity in an earlier chapter, written in stone and smoke dot. This is where our journey begins, with the most enduring humans who ever lived. Over the next chapters, we will walk in their footsteps, see how they built their world, and understand how their choices and adaptations still shape us today. From the heat of the African plains to the cool caves of Asia, from the glow of firelight to the daring of ocean crossings, we will follow Homo erectus, the species that defined what it meant to be human long before we arrived. Picture a trail of footprints pressed into wet earth 1.5 million years ago. The tracks stretch across a lakeshore in Kenya, left behind by a group moving steadily in one direction. Some prints are large and heavy, others smaller and lighter. Some stride wide and long, others short and close together. Together, they tell a story more powerful than any fossilized skull. Homo erectus didn't just walk like us, they moved as we do. These are not the awkward shuffles of ape-like ancestors. These are confident, balanced steps, the illiterate footprints, as archaeologists call them, capture a moment frozen in time, but they reveal so much more. They show a gait, essentially modern arches supporting the foot, a forward push off the big toe, limbs aligned for efficiency. To us, it seems ordinary. To science, it was revolutionary. These footprints are evidence that Homo erectus had become a true long-distance traveler. Their bodies were tuned for endurance rather than short bursts of speed. In the open savanna, where shade was scarce and predators roamed, this adaptation gave them an edge. They were taller than their predecessors, ranging from about 4 feet 9 to over 6 feet in height. Their bodies varied in build depending on where they lived, some lean and wiry in hot climates, others stockier in cooler regions. Their weight ranged from 40 kilograms to nearly 70, showing a remarkable ability to adapt physically to different environments. This plasticity, the capacity to change within limits, would become a defining hallmark of humans. and it first appears clearly in Homo erectus. Their faces, however, would have struck us as unfamiliar. They had low foreheads, heavy brow ridges, and flat skulls that sloped back, unlike our rounder heads. Their jaws were robust, with large teeth for chewing tough roots and meat. They lacked the pointed chin that defines our species. And yet, when you saw them walking from a distance, carrying a stone tool in one hand, you would have recognized them instantly as human. What set them apart, most of all, was stamina. Modern humans are unique among animals in our ability to run long distances under the hot sun, and that gift has its roots in Homo erectus. With hairless bodies compared to earlier species, and with far more sweat glands, they could shed heat efficiently while pursuing prey for hours. Where antelope and zebra might sprint and escape lions, Homo erectus used a different strategy: persistence hunting. They would simply keep going, following an animal under the blazing sun mile after mile. Eventually, the prey would collapse from heat exhaustion, while these ancient humans pressed on, cooled by sweat. In the story of survival, endurance was their secret weapon. Their shoulders, too, had evolved a remarkable feature rotation and flexibility for high-speed throwing. Earlier humans had shoulders more like chimpanzees, better for climbing than for hurling. Homo erectus, by contrast, could launch stones, spears, or wooden javelins with accuracy and force. Combined with teamwork, this made them formidable hunters. For the first time, humans had bodies not only made to travel, but also to strike at a distance. Sexual dimorphism, physical differences between males and females, was still visible in this species. Males tended to be larger and more robust, while females were smaller and lighter. But the gap wasn't as extreme as in gorillas or other apes, where large males dominate harems. Instead, Homo erectus seemed to be moving toward a more balanced social system, somewhere between the male-dominated structures of apes and the more cooperative societies of modern humans. The footprints at Illyria suggest men, women, and even children traveling together as a group. That image of community moving side by side may have been the earliest preview of the way humans would one day migrate across entire continents. Yet, these were not fragile wanderers. Their bones show strength, density, and resilience. Many skulls reveal healed fractures, evidence of lives filled with danger and violence, yet also survival after injury. A heavy brow ridge wasn't just a quirk of bone. It may have helped absorb the impact of blows from fists or clubs, for disputes within the group or struggles over mates. Life was hard, but their bodies were built to take punishment and keep going, and they were adaptable. From the heat of East Africa to the temperate forests of Europe and the islands of Southeast Asia, Homo erectus thrived. Few other species, human or animal, have shown such flexibility. They learned to live with new climates, different predators, and shifting landscapes. While other hominins vanished when the world changed, Erectus adjusted, endured, and continued. Consider how different their world looked compared to ours. Vast herds of ancient elephants, saber-toothed cats, and giant hyenas roamed the land. Volcanoes sculpted the horizon, rivers cut across savannas, and seasons swung between abundance and scarcity. Through it all, these ancient humans walked. Day after day, season after season, generation after generation. Always moving, always enduring. Their footprints remind us that survival isn't always about strength or even intelligence. It's about persistence. To keep walking when others fall. To adjust when the world shifts beneath you. To endure. This was the legacy of Homo erectus. As we follow their trail further, we'll discover how they paired this endurance with something even more transformative. They weren't just walkers and hunters. They were makers. With stone and with fire, they would take the next steps that pushed humanity far beyond the limits of instinct. And that is where our story turns next. Imagine the glow of a campfire flickering against stone walls nearly 1 million years ago. Sparks rise into the night air, shadows dance across faces, and in the hands of those gathered lies another revolution, a sharp-edged tool, chipped and shaped with purpose. Fire and stone, two simple things, yet together they transformed the fate of Homo erectus. From their earliest days, these ancient humans held stone in their hands differently than any creature before them. Earlier relatives like Homo habilis had discovered the old Darwin tradition, crude flakes struck from a pebble, sharp enough to slice meat or scrape bark. Useful but simple. Homo erectus went further. They began shaping stone with symmetry and foresight, creating what archaeologists call Acheulean hand axes. These were not random shards. They were teardrops of stone, carefully chipped on both sides to produce a balanced, razor-sharp edge. Holding one, you feel intent. It is heavy in the palm, the sharp tip glinting in sunlight, the flat base fitting neatly against the hand. These axes could butcher an animal, cut wood, dig roots, or scrape hides. They were the Swiss Army knives of the ancient world. What's more, they were made the same way across continents. From Africa to Europe to Asia, the Acheulean hand axe endured for over 1 million years, hardly changing. That kind of stability tells us something profound. Knowledge was being passed down. Not in books, not in writing, but through eyes watching, hands copying, and elders teaching. Imagine a child crouched beside a parent, watching each strike of stone on stone. One slip, the edge shatters. One careful tap, and the perfect flake falls away. This wasn't instinct, it was culture. A tradition preserved not by genes, but by memory and imitation. In these tools, we see the first flickers of human education. But fire was the true spark. At first, it likely came by accident. A lightning strike setting trees ablaze, or a brush fire sweeping across the savanna. Where most animals fled, Homo erectus saw opportunity. They learned to carry embers, to feed a smoldering branch until it became flame again. For countless generations, they may not have known how to make fire, only how to keep it alive. That alone was revolutionary. The earliest hints of fire use are debated. Some sites in Africa suggest charred bones and burned soil nearly 1.5 million years old, though scholars argue about whether those fires were natural. More solid evidence comes later layered hearths in Israel, dating to about 780,000 years ago. Wherever the truth lies, one thing is certain. Once Homo erectus had fire, life was never the same. Think of what it meant. Nights no longer ended in darkness. The circle of firelight pushed predators back, giving safety where there had been only fear. A flame stretched the day, creating evenings for rest, for talk, for the slow weaving of community. Fire also changed the body itself. Cooked food is softer, easier to chew, and richer in calories. Roots that once broke teeth became edible. Meat that was tough and risky became nourishing. With cooking, less energy was needed for digestion, freeing up more for the brain. Some scientists even suggest that fire and food together set the stage for the great leap in human brain size that would come later. But fire was not just practical. Around those flames, imagination stirred. Picture a group sitting together, sparks, floating upward into the night. Faces glow orange and red, eyes reflecting light. For the first time, there is space for something beyond survival. Perhaps gestures grew richer, sounds more varied, as stories were acted out in the firelight. Perhaps plans for tomorrow's hunt were made as the embers glowed. Perhaps comfort was found in simply being together, secure for a few precious hours. In the glow of fire, we see the earliest roots of culture, ritual, and shared identity. Stone and fire also reshaped the landscape. Aculean axes allowed carcasses to be butchered cleanly, bones to be cracked for marrow. Fire cleared patches of forest, opening grasslands for animals to graze, which in turn drew hunters. Slowly, Homo erectus was not just adapting to the world, but changing it in ability that would become uniquely human. Consider how extraordinary this was. For millions of years, life on Earth followed the rhythms of instinct and environment. Then a species appeared that could imagine something different, shaping stone not by chance, but by design, keeping fire alive not just by luck, but by skill. These were the first whispers of mastery over nature, not through brute strength, but through thought and cooperation. Yet, their world was never easy. Fires went out, tools broke, droughts came. Still, Homo erectus endured, carrying embers from one season to the next, shaping new axes when old ones dulled, teaching their children how to strike, chip, and preserve. They didn't change their tools much over 1,000,000 years, but perhaps they didn't need to. What they had worked. Efficiency, stability, survival, that was their genius. Tonight, if you sit by a fire or hold a knife in your hand, you are repeating gestures almost 2,000,000 years old. The sparks that leap from the logs echo the first flames that kept predators. Away on the African plains, the edge of your blade recalls the chipped stone tools that carved meat from bone. These are not just inventions. They are inheritances, passed down across thousands of generations. Fire and stone. They gave Homo erectus endurance, protection, and power. But they also opened the door to something more subtle, more human. Around the flames, with tools laid, by their sides, they began to care for one another, to imagine, to leave marks of meaning. In the next part of their story, we will see not just survivors, but beings who showed compassion, who healed, who scratched patterns into shells, and gathered colors from the earth. The beginnings of mind, not just body. Bones do not lie. They carry in their fractures, their scars, and their healing the whispers of a world long gone. Among the most telling are the remains of a toothless elder found at Menisi in Georgia, more than 1.7 million years old. The jaw was empty of teeth. The gums would have been too weak for chewing hard food, and yet this person survived for years. How? The only answer is care. Others must have chewed food for them, softened roots, or shared meat in small bites. Compassion, something we like to claim as uniquely ours, was already alive in the world of Homo erectus. This wasn't an isolated case. Another fossil, the famous Turkana boy from Kenya, shows evidence of spinal problems that would have caused pain and difficulty walking. Yet he lived long enough to reach adolescence. In Indonesia, a specimen with serious bone disease survived for years despite its disability. Again, the conclusion is clear. These early humans did not abandon the weak. They supported them, carried them, kept them alive. What does this tell us? That Homo erectus was more than just an endurance runner or fire keeper. They were social beings bound by ties deeper than survival. To feed someone who cannot hunt, to shelter someone who slows the group, this is not efficiency. It is empathy. It is recognition of value beyond utility. In those gestures of care, we see the roots of what it means to be human. Their culture, too, went beyond the practical. The Aculean hand axe, as we saw, was a masterpiece of function, but its symmetrical beauty hints at something more. These tools were not just effective. They were pleasing to the eye. Was this aesthetic intentional? Did the makers value balance and form? We cannot be sure, but the possibility lingers like a shadow on stone. Then there is the shell from Trinil, Java. Scratched into its surface is a zigzag pattern, deliberate and precise. It dates back more than 400,000 years, making it one of the oldest engravings known to science. It is not a doodle left by accident. It is a mark intentional and repeated, serving no clear survival purpose. Was it art? A symbol? A memory etched in bone white? Whatever its meaning, it reveals that Homo erectus had begun to move into the realm of abstraction. They could take the world in their hands and leave behind not just tools, but signs, and they had colors. At sites in Africa and Europe, archaeologists have found lumps of red ochre associated with Homo erectus. Some are shaped, some show grinding marks. Ochre can be used for many things, perhaps to tan hides, perhaps as an insect repellent, but in later humans it becomes pigment, paint, symbol. Did Homo erectus smear it on their skin? Did they color objects, mark their bodies, decorate? The dead? We cannot say. But the fact that they collected it at all suggests they saw something in color beyond function. Communication, too, was evolving. They did not have our language. Their brains, especially the frontal lobes, were smaller, and their spinal cord, canals narrower, limiting fine control of speech. The language gene, FOX2, likely wasn't in its modern form. Yet silence is unlikely. To organize a hunt, to share knowledge of tool-making, to warn of predators, they needed more than grunts. Scientists believe they used a blend of sounds, gestures, and facial expressions. Perhaps a call to signal danger, a gesture to signal. Direction, a shared rhythm of shouts during a group hunt. Primitive compared to us, but far ahead of the apes. Enough to build community, to teach, to transmit. This is sometimes called mimetic culture, the use of demonstration, gesture, and sound to share knowledge. Imagine a group of Homo erectus gathered around a child, teaching them how to chip stone. The teacher strikes one side of the rock, makes a sharp sound, then gestures, urging the child to mimic. The child's first blow cracks the stone wrong, producing a jagged edge. Laughter, perhaps, encouragement, a new attempt. Knowledge moves not by words, but by showing. In that cycle of imitation lies the first school, the first lesson, the first culture, and there was memory. The ability to heal an elder's wounds, to preserve food knowledge, to pass down how to keep fire. All this required not just instinct, but recall. They carried history not in writing, but in bodies and gestures. Every scar healed, every elder living another year, was a page in a living book. But their lives were not peaceful idols. Skulls from across their range show fractures and healed injuries, suggesting violence and conflict were common. Some may have been accidents, some deliberate strikes with clubs or stones. Life was hard, and disputes over food, mates, or territory could easily erupt. Yet even these fractures tell us something remarkable. Many individuals survived after injury, meaning others must have tended to them, carried them through pain, and ensured their survival. Violence and care coexisted, just as they do in us. Consider the emotional lives that must have burned within them. Did they feel grief when one of their own died? Did they comfort one another at night? Did they feel pride at a successful hunt? Or shame at failure? We cannot know, but their actions suggest they felt more than hunger and fear. In their care for the weak, in their deliberate scratches on shells, in their gathering of ochre, we see flickers of imagination, compassion, and perhaps even beauty. When we think of Homo erectus, it is tempting to picture rough survival stone. In hand, fire at feet, eyes wary of predators. But their story is richer. They were not merely surviving, they were becoming. Becoming social, becoming symbolic, becoming mindful. They walked the long bridge between instinct and imagination, carrying humanity forward step by step. Theirs was a world lit not only by fire, but by meaning. And in those quiet sparks scare for the weak, art scratched into shells, gestures passed between teacher and student, we glimpse the first glimmer of the human mind. In the next chapter, we will see how these minds used their endurance, tools, and cooperation to conquer landscapes, hunt great beasts, and even cross the sea into islands that seemed beyond reach. The footprints of Homo erectus will take us to the edges of their courage and show how far determination can carry a species. The sun rises over a wide plain. Dew clings to tall grasses. Herds of antelope scatter at the first light, and in the distance, figures move with patient determination. They are not the fastest hunters, nor the strongest, but they carry a secret. Weapon, the gift of endurance. For Homo erectus, the day was measured not in minutes of chase, but in hours of persistence. Imagine an antelope startled into a sprint. Lions might give chase, but soon tire, their bodies overheating under the relentless sun. Homo erectus did something different. With lean bodies, hairless skin, and an unmatched ability to sweat, they simply kept going. Step after step, they shadowed their prey across the savanna. While the animal panted, body heat building, Erectus cooled with every drop of sweat. After hours, the antelope stumbled, exhausted, and there stood the hunters, steady and patient. This was persistence hunting, the strategy that made them masters of the plains. Their tools made the task easier. Aculean hand axes could slice meat, crack bones for marrow, and prepare hides. Their shoulders, evolved for throwing, allowed them to hurl stones or wooden spears to weaken an animal from afar. But success was not just about weapons. It was about cooperation. A single human alone would have struggled. But together, communicating with gestures and shouts, they surrounded prey, drove it toward traps, and shared the rewards. In the act of hunting, their communities were bound tighter, and their diet was wide. They ate more than just meat. Fossil sites reveal collections of cracked nuts, burned roots, bird eggs, fish bones, and shellfish remains. They scavenged when they could, pulling flesh from carcasses left by other predators. Children likely gathered small prey lizards, rodents, tortoises, while adults went after larger game. Flexibility was their strength. Where earlier species relied on limited foods, Homo erectus became opportunists. Their omnivorous diet gave them resilience, allowing survival in forests, grasslands, coastlines, and even high plateaus. But even hunters can become hunted. For every successful kill, there was danger lurking. Hyenas stalked their camps. Saber-toothed cats prowled the edges of grasslands. Fossils tell grim stories. Skulls bearing punctures that match the teeth of giant hyenas, scattered bones gnawed, and broken in caves. Many Homo erectus individuals did not die of age or disease. They became meals for predators. Life was a constant balance between hunter and hunted, courage and caution. Fire helped, but it was not always enough. Still, danger pushed them to new strategies. By rivers and coasts, they discovered that the waters offered abundance without pursuit. Shellfish, crabs, fish rich in protein and fats could be collected with little risk. These foods, especially high in omega-3 south, may have fueled their growing brains. Evidence from ancient sites shows deliberate cracking of shells, scraping of fish bones, and even the use of water edges as gathering grounds. In turning to the sea, Homo erectus expanded their menu and perhaps their minds. And then came the crossings. Across the Indonesian archipelago lie islands that were never connected to the mainland, even in ice ages when sea levels fell. One of these, Flores, holds tools over 800,000 years old. How did they get there? No natural land bridge existed. The only explanation is that Homo erectus found a way to cross open water. The Lombok Strait, which separates these islands, is no gentle river. It is more than 20 miles wide, with strong currents pulling between the Indian and Pacific Oceans. To reach Flores, they would have needed some form of raft or simple boat. And above all, coordination. Picture it. A group gathers on a shore, logs lashed together with vines, branches woven for buoyancy. The sea roars, waves crash, but they push off anyway. Some paddle, others cling tight, the horizon swaying with each swell. The crossing is perilous, many might have failed, but some succeeded. They reached new islands, bringing with them fire, tools, and culture. This was no accident. To attempt such a crossing required planning, courage, and communication. Theirs may not have been language as we know it, but it was enough to plan the impossible. These voyages hint at something extraordinary. While much of the world still belonged to instinct-driven creatures, Homo erectus had begun to bend nature. They did not simply follow food, they sought it across boundaries. They expanded into territories thought unreachable. They shaped their environment with fire, shaped stone to their will, and now shaped wood into rafts. Slowly they became the first global explorers long before our species arrived. Hunting, gathering, fishing, voyaging, their survival strategy was not a single act, but a mosaic of adaptations. They could stalk gazelle under the sun, gather nuts from forests, pull clams from mud, and dare seas that most animals would never cross. That flexibility made them the longest living human species in history. But what did it feel like? Imagine standing on the coast at night, waves hissing, stars mirrored on black water. Fire flickers behind you, prey lies butchered on stone slabs, and the group gathers to eat. Children lick roasted marrow from bones. Elders hum or gesture stories in the firelight. And just beyond the horizon lies another island, another world. Some would stay, some would leave. The courage to cross is not new. It has always been part of us. For nearly 2 million years, this was their rhythm. Chase and rest, feast and hunger, danger and daring. Step by step, fire by fire, raft by raft, they wrote the longest chapter of human endurance. Yet even the longest chapters must one day end. As climates shifted and rivals arose, their world began to shrink. The forests grew denser in places where plains once stretched. The last holdouts in Java clung on as long as they could, but the ember would soon pass to others. Still, their spirit lingers. In every campfire, in every hunt, in every voyage across water, we echo Homo erectus. They were the first to prove that survival is not about being the biggest or the strongest, but about persistence, adaptability, and the courage to cross into the unknown. And so we arrive at the final stage of their journey, the vanishing of vanishing. A species that had endured longer than any other humans. In the next chapter, we will see how Homo erectus faced the greatest challenges of all: climate change, competition, and the slow fading of their story into ours. The forest closed in. Where once there had been open plains, where wind chased antelope across endless grass, now thick green canopies rose, tangled and dense. Rivers changed their courses, seasons shifted, and the land that had carried Homo erectus for nearly 2 million years was transforming into something unfamiliar. Their long chapter, the longest in human history, was beginning to fade. For most of their reign, Homo erectus had been masters of endurance. They had faced droughts, volcanic eruptions, predators, and shifting landscapes, and each time they adapted. But around 115,000 years ago, the world entered one of the coldest and most unstable climatic periods it had ever known, the last glacial cycle. Great sheets of ice advanced across the northern hemisphere. Oceans receded, and climates everywhere became harsher in Africa and Asia. New human species were rising: Homo heidelbergensis, the ancestors of Neanderthals, and eventually Homo sapiens. Our own kind. These rivals carried new tools, new hunting strategies, and sharper flexibility. They were problem solvers in ways that Erectus never fully mastered. Where Homo erectus had relied on tools that remained largely unchanged for 1 million years, these newcomers experimented, innovated, and pushed technology further. Competition was not just about tools, it was about adaptability of mind. While Homo erectus endured through tradition, others advanced through change. The Acheulean hand axe had carried them through centuries, but now it was becoming a symbol of conservatism, of strategies that no longer fit a rapidly changing world. Their last refuge was Java, an island in Indonesia. There, protected by its equatorial climate, Homo erectus survived long after disappearing elsewhere. While ice sheets spread across Europe, while Neanderthals learned to survive in freezing steppes, while early Homo sapiens spread cautiously across continents, small bands of erectus still lit fires on the banks of rivers, still chipped stone, still hunted in forests. For tens of thousands of years, they held on. But even islands are not eternal havens. Java's forests thickened into rainforests, a landscape poorly suited to the old ways. Hunting large animals grew harder in dense vegetation, visibility shrank, and opportunities dwindled. The strategies that had carried them across millennia began to falter. And slowly, generation by generation, they vanished from the record. Was it only climate and competition that ended them? Some researchers suggest something deeper, a reluctance to innovate. Fossil sites in Indonesia show Homo erectus often used. Whatever stone lay nearby, even when better materials existed a short distance away. Perhaps they chose what was good enough. Perhaps their culture valued tradition over experimentation. That strategy had worked brilliantly for most of their history. But when the world changed too quickly, good enough was no longer enough, yet we must be careful. It is easy to judge from the safety of hindsight, but for nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus survived, longer than Neanderthals, longer than Denisovans, longer so far than us. If anything, their conservatism may have been wisdom, a slow stability that carried them across ages. In the end, though, the pace of change outstripped their ability to endure. But perhaps extinction is not the right word. Many scientists now believe that Homo erectus did not simply disappear. In some regions, they may have evolved into other human lineages, Homo heidelbergensis, perhaps, or even contributing in tangled ways to our own ancestry. Recent studies of ancient DNA reveal traces of archaic humans inside us, ghostly signatures that don't match Neanderthals or Denisovans. Could some of that be erectus? We cannot yet be sure, but the possibility lingers. And even without genetic traces, their legacy is everywhere. The way we walk long legs, balanced stride, efficient distance was theirs first. The way we hunt not by brute strength, but by cooperation, endurance, and persistence was theirs first. The way we gather at firelight, pass knowledge hand to hand, care for our weak and elderly, those too were theirs first. We like to imagine humanity began with us, but the truth is simpler. Much of what we are was carried forward from Homo erectus. So, what does their story teach us? Above all, it shows that survival is not about brilliance or strength alone. It is about resilience, adaptability, and patience. For nearly 2 million years, Homo erectus endured in ways no other human species ever has. They did not build cities, or carve writing into stone, or gaze through telescopes, but they thrived. And that longevity is its own form of greatness. It also warns us. If even Homo erectus, with their endurance, their fire, their tools, and their adaptability could one day vanish, then so can we. Our species has existed for only 300,000 years. By their measure, we are still children. We race forward with speed, but will speed prove as lasting as patience? We are masters of innovation, but can we endure the pressures we ourselves are creating? Climate change, dwindling resources, fractured environments, the very forces that eroded erectus still haunt us. The difference is that our changes arrive not over millennia, but in decades. And yet, Hope also burns in their story. Homo erectus showed that the human path is not merely biological. It is cultural. It is technological. It is cooperative. They pioneered the human adaptive niche, surviving not by waiting for the body to evolve, but by creating tools, strategies, and social bonds that bridge the gap between environment and survival. That path leads directly to us. Every time we solve a problem with culture rather than instinct, every time we innovate to survive, we walk the trail they blazed. Picture them once more, a small group on the edge of a forest, a fire burning low, a hand axe resting on stone. Their world is shrinking, but their legacy is not. 2 million years of footsteps echo in ours. They were not a prelude, not a primitive draft, but the most successful humans ever to walk the earth. And though their fires went out, their ember burns on in our bodies, our tools, our stories. The echo of Homo erectus is not just in the fossils they left behind. It is in us. Asterisk. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your country below.